When we talk about Ghana's struggle for independence, the story is almost always centered around men. And so we hear the founding fathers, men, the big six, all men. We hear about the speeches, the arrests, the parties, the protests, and most of the names we hear are men. And if we're being fair, most of those men earned their place in history. But Ghana's independence was not carried by men alone. You see, behind the rallies, behind the party offices, behind the market networks, and behind the grassroots mobilization, there were women. Women who funded the movement, women who organized people, women who used their voices, their homes, their money, and sometimes their own safety to push Ghana toward independence. But somehow, many of these women have been treated like footnotes, remembered in passing, but rarely given the credit they deserve. So, as Mother's Day approaches, I want us to look beyond the women who gave life to our families and remember the women who helped give life to the nation Ghana. If Ghana has founding fathers, then these are some of Ghana's founding mothers. Not in any official order. Let's get into it. Hannah Kudjoe. If we want to talk about women who helped move Ghana toward independence, Hannah Kudjoe's name is not optional. The historian Jean Ullman described her as Ghana's leading woman nationalist of the 1940s and 1950s. Hannah Kudjoe was not just attending meetings with the politicians. She was organizing women, mobilizing rallies, and carrying the independence message beyond the educated elite into communities, markets, and everyday spaces where ordinary people also needed to believe that freedom was possible. In 1948, when the Big Six were arrested, Hannah Kudjoe helped lead the petition campaign demanding for their release. Now, that is worth mentioning because while the men were being remembered as political prisoners, women like Hannah Kudjoe were outside, building pressure, gathering support, and keeping the movement alive. And she did not disappear after independence. She later founded the All African Women's League and became involved in social welfare work, focusing on women, children, hygiene, nurseries, and community development. Hannah Kudjoe was not a side character in Ghana's independence story. Before independence, she helped organize the struggle. And after independence, she helped build the nation Ghana. But Ghana's independence was not only fought through rallies. It was also fought through words. And that brings us to Mabel Dove Danquah. You see, some people fought colonial rule with speeches. Some fought it with protests. Mabel Dove Danquah fought it with a pen. She was a journalist, a writer, and a political activist at a time when both journalism and politics were heavily dominated by men. So her presence in those spaces was already a statement. But her role was more than symbolic. In 1951, Kwame Nkrumah appointed her as the editor of the Accra Evening News, a nationalist newspaper that helped spread the CPP's message of self-government now. That means she was not writing from the sidelines as a random journalist. She was helping shape the language of the whole movement. She helped ordinary people understand why independence mattered in the first place, and why self-government was possible, and why colonial rule could be challenged. In 1954, she moved from writing about politics to entering politics itself. She stood as the CPP candidate for Ga Rural and won, becoming the first woman elected to the Gold Coast Legislative Assembly. But while Mabel Dove Danquah was fighting with words, another woman was helping power up the movement with something every political struggle needs: money. The third woman is Rebecca Naa Dedei Aryeetey, popularly known as Dedei Ashikishan. She was a successful flour trader and one of Nkrumah and the CPP's important financial supporters. There are several public accounts that credit her with helping fund Kwame Nkrumah's campaign in central Accra, often linked to the Asiedu Keteke seat, an important step in Nkrumah's rise to national leadership. The Asiedu Keteke seat is now part of what we call Ododo Diodio. Dedei Ashikishan did not only give money from a distance, she also hosted and led the CPP women's activities from her personal home in Kokomlimli. And that tells us something interesting about Ghanaian market women and Ghanaian politicians. You see, market women do not just sell goods. They have money. They have networks. They have influence. They know the streets, the communities, the prices of goods and services, the gossip, the pains of the people, and the mood of the country. They can feel it firsthand. And Ghanaian politicians have always understood this. People may look down on market women. They may reduce them to women selling flour, tomatoes, fish, cloth, or food by the roadside. But the politicians know better. They know market women can move people. They can spread information. They can fund campaigns. They can shape public opinion in ways speeches alone cannot. For me, Dedei Ashikishan represents the political power of Ghanaian market women. The kind of woman who may not always stand behind the microphone, but can decide whether the microphone is working in the first place. Today, her image appears on Ghana's 50 pesos coin, and I think it's a very fitting way to remember her. Sophia Doku. Sophia Doku's name does not come up often enough, but she absolutely belongs in this conversation. Not every freedom fighter becomes famous through speeches, headlines, or dramatic moments. Some people build the machinery that makes the movement work. And without that, even the loudest speeches can die in thin air. Sophia Doku was one of those people. In May 1951, the CPP appointed her as a propaganda secretary with the task of helping to build the CPP Women's League. Now, that may sound like a simple party role, but it was much bigger than that in the 1950s. It meant helping to create branches, wards, rallies, community gatherings, and women's networks. The kind of everyday political work that turns a party from just a name on paper into a movement that people can actually feel in their communities and identify with. And like Hannah Kudjoe, Sophia Doku's work did not end with independence. In 1953, she was appointed Assistant Welfare Officer in the Department of Social Welfare. And in 1958, she became the first female camp superintendent of the Builders Brigade. She later became one of the first women to sit in Ghana's first Republican Parliament. Not always in the spotlight, but absolutely essential. Akua, Asabea, Ayisi. If Mabel of Danquah showed the power of the pen, Akua Asabea Ayisi showed how young women could enter the newsroom and turn journalism into activism. Akua Asabea Ayisi was one of Ghana's early female journalists. She worked with Kwame Nkrumah and Mabel of Danquah on the Accra Evening News. The Accra Evening News was one of the newspapers that helped spread nationalist ideas during the struggle for self-government. But she was not just sitting quietly in the background. She wrote a woman's column on the front page of the paper, where she demanded independence and education for women. At a time when many women were expected to stay away from politics, Akua Asabea Ayisi was using the newspaper to make a bold point that women were not just spectators in the struggle. Women had a voice, women had ideas, women had a place in the future Ghana was fighting for. Theodosia Okoh, and I know you saw that coming. Now, her role is a little bit different. Independence was not only about bringing down a colonial flag. It was also about raising your own flag and knowing what it means. And Theodosia Okoh was the woman who designed Ghana's national flag. The red, the gold, the green, and the black star. The flag was raised when Ghana became independent in 1957. The Gold Coast was gone, and Ghana had arrived. So even if Theodosia Okoh was not fighting colonial rule with speeches and protests, she helped give Ghana its visual identity. So in telling Ghana's independence story, we should never tell it as if only men carried the dream. Yes, the names of the founding fathers are important, but beside them were women who organized, women who wrote, women who funded, marched, mobilized, built networks, shaped ideas, designed symbols, and gave the movement life on the ground. Some of their names are famous, others are still not mentioned enough. But Ghana's freedom was not built by men alone. It was built by a people, and these women deserve their place in that story. So this Mother's Day, we do not only celebrate mothers for giving life. We also have to celebrate the woman who helped give birth to the nation Ghana.